Hello, welcome back to another installment of the Jewish Bookshelf. In this installment, we will be doing the Jewish prayer book, the Siddur. If you have not already subscribed to this channel, please go ahead and do so. If you feel that you've benefited from these videos or any of my other series and feel drawn to help, please consider making a contribution. You can follow the links to my PayPal account in the description below, or consider becoming a Patreon. Okay, without further ado, the Siddur. So the Siddur, as we saw in the by the Chumash, there is this predilection towards shortening phrases into single words. So just as in the Chumash, the printed edition of the Torah, the phrase is Chamisha Chamsha Torah, the 5/5 of the Torah, and that is shortened to Chumash. So too, the Seder HaTefillot, Seder HaTefillot, is shortened to Siddur. The order of the prayers, Seder HaTefillot, that is shortened to the word Siddur. Really means the Seder, the order. Okay, so just some factoids. So the core of the prayer service is the idea that there are three basic prayer services of the day: the Shacharit, the Mincha, and the Ma'ariv. Of course, that is mimicking the times of activity in the temple. What's new is that there should be some form of prayer outside the temple, some sort of formal prayer outside the temple. You see during the exile and in the post-exilic period, we see these practices formalizing. The synagogue, the use of synagogues, houses of worship, prayer halls. The text of our prayers, the core texts, were assembled and edited and authorized by the men of the Great Assembly, the Anshe Knesset HaGadola. These were the authorities, the early post-exilic authorities. These included such biblical authors as Ezra and Nehemiah. And ultimately, it was this body that evolved into what we currently recognize as rabbis. So those texts continue to develop through the Second Temple period, into the Mishnaic and the Talmudic periods. So some of the earliest manuscripts of the Siddur are from the time of the Gaonim. These are manuscripts, these are texts such as the Siddur of Saadia Gaon or the Siddur of Amram Gaon. The Gaonic period is the period that falls immediately after the close of the Talmud, and is roughly year 800, 900, 1000, or around that time period. That's the time of the Gaonim. And these were, this time period marks a shift away from the Talmudic method and more of a move towards halacha as we know it. So we also start having more and more manuscripts from this period onward. And not surprisingly, many of these manuscripts were texts of various prayers, or in some cases the entire Siddurim. Okay, both the Siddur of Amram Gaon and Saadia Gaon are available in scholarly editions. They're not used in daily worship as such anymore, at least not that I know of. But they're available, and it's very interesting to compare the older forms of certain texts to the medieval forms that we use today. Okay, so from the medieval to the early modern period, we see, after the dispersion throughout the Jewish world, throughout the Gaonic period, there were just a few Jews in Europe, more Jews in North Africa, but the majority of Jews resided in the Levant, the land of Israel, and in Iraq and Babylon, Babel, those areas. That's where the majority of the Jewish communities were. From the Gaonic period onward, we see these communities began to travel, and we see that many of them went north into Europe, many of them went throughout the Mediterranean world into Africa. Many communities went further east, going as far as India, even a smaller community that existed in China. So they all fanned out from that central point. So by the medieval period and into our current period, the early modern period with the advent of the printing press, we see that there was a very regional focus. These communities, the texts evolved and practices evolved in various communities, and we see that the prayers, anybody from, say, North Africa who would visit, say, medieval France, would recognize to some degree the texts, but there would be some new texts. There would be some changes introduced into the service, and these changes and these regional variants are referred to by the term of Nusach. Nusach. Now, I have will in the notes below. I will put in a link to a very fine Wikipedia page that deals with the concept of Nusach, and it's discusses some of the more common and also more rare variants. But for the purposes of this video, we're just going to discuss the more common regional variants. Okay, so we have Nusach Ashkenaz. The Nusach Ashkenaz is the rite, the version of the prayer service that is used by European communities, European Jewish communities, especially those in Western and Northern Europe, Northeastern Europe, and also into Eastern Europe. So that's Ashkenaz. Of course, Ashkenaz is the medieval name. It really is a biblical name, but it's the name applied by the rabbis to the land of Germany, and they called it Ashkenaz for various reasons. They applied that name to the land of Germany. Okay, the next one is Nusach Sfard. Nusach Sfard. So Nusach Sfard is also an Ashkenazi Nusach, despite the name Sfard. It's an Ashkenazi Nusach, and this is the Nusach that is common amongst Hasidim, although it predates the Hasidic movement. It is predominantly used by Jews from Eastern Europe, especially the Jews of Poland, Hungary, the Ukraine, Russia. They use a version of the Nusach Sfard. This is largely under the influence of a rabbi called the Ari. He and his school of thinking became very influential, and we see that there was a move to adapt the old Ashkenazi Nusach to the teachings of the Ari. Also, it is worth considering that Poland and Hungary and the Ukraine, places like this, also are geographically closer to the land of Israel, closer to the so-called Middle East, Turkey, places like this. And so it's also, from a geographic sense, it makes sense that there would be a blending of Ashkenazi and Sephardi texts. Okay, so also there is a generic Nusach Sfard, and then the Hasidic groups tend to have their own prayer books. Lubavitch, for instance, is a Hasidic group that comes from Belarus, White Russia, and they have their own version of the prayer book called Tehillat Hashem. I will include links to that text, to that particular siddur, as well as good examples of all these siddurim in the notes below. But Tehillat Hashem is the text that the Lubavitch Hasidim use. I use a particular variety of Nusach Sfard that was printed in Berdichev, a town strongly associated with Hasidus. So we have that, and then we have just the generic Sfard, which is kind of what you're going to see from Artscroll. What they attempted to do was to create a siddur that would satisfy everybody. So some people say they created a siddur that attempts to satisfy everybody and satisfies nobody, but that's whatever the case, it's still a fine siddur, and it's probably the most commonly used siddur. Both their version of Nusach Ashkenaz and Nusach Sfard are probably, in America, in the United States, it's probably the most commonly used Orthodox siddur. Okay, enough of that. We have the Nusach Sfardi, not Nusach Sfard, Nusach Sfardi, which is the Nusach used by those Jews that come from a Spanish and Portuguese background. The term Sfardi is generically applied to all, frequently applied to all non-Ashkenazi Jews. That's not exactly true. Sfardim proper are from those Jews that descended from the Jews of Spain and Portugal. The other Jews, Jews from throughout the Middle East, can be termed as the Edut HaMizrach. That's the other Nusach, Edut HaMizrach. The Nusach of the Edut, the congregations, HaMizrach, of the East. So frequently, Sfardi and Edut HaMizrach are going to be lumped together. Now, a proper Nusach Sfardi would be like what you would find in a proper Spanish Portuguese synagogue, like Sharat Yisrael in New York, or the synagogue in Amsterdam. Kehilot that maintain a very strong Spanish Portuguese identity. By and large, since the state of Israel, Sfardi means pretty much not Ashkenazi. So we see a blending of those practices. Okay, so we have Edut HaMizrach again, which would be Jews from Iraq and places like this. Okay, so Ashkenaz, Sephardi, and Edut HaMizrach. Here in America, Ashkenaz and Sephard are going to be your most common, and then the Sephardi community tends to, many times the synagogues tend to print their own texts, their own Siddurim, but you will see there are more Sephardi materials available now. They've basically come to the table and started printing and making nationally available Siddurim. So you do see more. They don't have quite the market share, again, that Artscroll. Artscroll is a very Ashkenazi-oriented company. But they don't have the same market share because of the basic composition of American Jews. But they still are making a stab at it, and definitely those communities are growing in the United States as well. Okay, so let's talk about some examples of the Siddurim. Okay, so for a good Ashkenaz or Sephard Siddur, I just recommend getting just the standard old Artscroll. It's the Siddur you're going to see around. I like it. The newer editions have a strong binding. If you're not familiar with the synagogue service, it pays to use the Siddur that is used by the congregation. virtually any congregation you go into here in the United States is going to have Siddurim available, so that you can be on the same page literally as everybody else. But also, if you want to have a text at home and have you consistently use the same prayer book, that's a good practice for starting out. So I recommend the Artscroll Siddur, either in the Ashkenazi or Sephardic. Okay. Artscroll has an interlinear product as well. This is where the text of the Siddur that has the English translation above each word. This Siddur comes in 2 volumes, one for Weekday and one for Shabbat, and it comes in Ashkenazi and Sephardic again. So for study, I think this is a good text. However, the pagination is not the same as their other Siddur, so you will be on a different page than everybody else in the shul, in the synagogue. So I recommend this one for personal study or for maybe personal use at home, whereas for congregational activities, I recommend going with the regular Siddur. And also the Koren. I don't have pictures of the Koren here, but Koren is making a stab towards the American market, as I've mentioned, and they have both interlinear and parallel Siddurim in both Ashkenaz and Sephardic, so they're definitely worthwhile, and some of the more modern Orthodox synagogues have taken to using Koren products. Okay, so here is an example of what the Artscroll interlinear text looks like. I said above, but it's really below. Moda ani, I give thanks. And it has very fine directions. So if you're new to the sort of the flow of the Jewish day and the Jewish prayer life, this product is very worth looking into. Okay, very usable. Like I said, the only real drawback is that these have not really been adopted into synagogue use, as far as I've seen, and as such, you will always be on a different page than the other people. So it'll be on you to listen and know where you are at any given moment in the prayer service. Okay, for Sephardi or for Edu to Mizrach, we have the Orot publishing house. This is probably one of the more common Sephardi prayer books that you're going to see around. Definitely, it's designed for English speakers, so it doesn't assume an extensive knowledge of Hebrew. So it's going to be useful. I've various Sephardi outreach organizations that I've come in contact with very often will use this Siddur. So this is definitely, I've looked in it. I don't own a copy, but I can attest that it's a well done Siddur. Okay, so that basically is that. We'll put links below for the various Siddurim that we've talked about in this video. Maybe some more as well, so you can check out. I strongly recommend that you purchase whatever your synagogue is. You purchase the prayer book that is used at that synagogue, so that you can stay on the same page, so that you can become immersed in the version of the order of the prayers that's used in what is your community. And definitely you can purchase other editions for research purposes. It's all very fascinating. So, okay, I appreciate you joining in. I wish you the best. Kol Tuv, Hatzlacha Rabba. Keep learning.